What's up, party people? It's your boy Optimus Code. Welcome to the channel. Okay, so today we have part 2 of our interview with AAA developer Larry Gates II on sound design in video games. In this video, we cover the details of using licensed music from artists, publishing houses, and all the stuff that goes into getting specific music into your video game that you didn't create yourself. And if you stick around to the end of the video, you'll hear some awesome stories about how these playlists for these video games are designed, how this whole thing works, and how they come up with the radio stations and the DJs and all of this good stuff for these open world video games. Okay, so we left off the last time with Larry explaining how the narrative is created and how the voice acting and all that stuff comes together in script form. If you missed that video, I'll put it on the screen so that you can check it out. This week, he's talking about playlists and creating music and using licensed music, and we're going to get right to it. All right, so that's a great segue because the other thing that you mentioned was music. You do voice and you do music. So looking at you, my red-blooded American white boy friend, people would not understand how deep you are into hip-hop. I guarantee you that half the people watching right now couldn't touch you when it comes to hip-hop. And I know how much you are into hip-hop.
Right.
Who decides what music is in a game, especially something like a Saints Row, not any particular Saints Row.
Right.
There's a heavy urban presence in Saints Row itself.
Yeah.
How do you guys decide what music is appropriate? When's it an orchestra? When's it hip hop?
Mm-hmm.
When's it corn? Like, how do you guys decide this?
It's sort of the same thing as narrative in that, you know, you've got your stakeholders, but it's myself and the audio lead, a guy named Brandon Bray, will kind of brainstorm and come up with the big ticket items. Here's what we think represents. And then, you know, we'll make playlists and sort of boil those down. I mean, we spend hours making Spotify lists and sending it to each other, and then we hone in on something, and then we can start to float that up and down the chain to all of the directors and stakeholders. Mm-hmm. Make sure that we're all on the same page about a certain vibe. Now, whether that is the overall vibe of the game or we're talking about a specific mission moment where we really want something to land, or a cinematic moment where we really want something to land. Okay. And so, you know, we kind of get on the same page, and then we use a house licensing broker house out of LA, who will then take what we're after and do all the legwork, like I said, as far as rights holders to the songs, publishers, and sort of put that in a budget for us. Sometimes, and it depends how you use a song, especially in film. Sometimes you'll hear a lick of a song that you know, but the vocals never kick in. So that's two things. They're using the instrumental only, and then maybe they're using only 20 seconds of it. Those are all different price points. If you use a full song versus the instrumental versus just a small loop of it. And so, you know, songs might cost us, you know, $2 to $5K for something down here. And then somebody with some visibility might cost you $5 to $10K. And then if you're going with something old and tried and true, you know, a soundtrack like Guardians of the Galaxy, where it's all well-known 70s hit,
yeah,
those are going to start at $20K just to put them, you know.
So the older, the more expensive?
Well, the more popular, not, you know,
okay.
There's old music that folks don't know of, but if it was a bona fide hit, the bidding will probably start at $20K and go north of there a lot of times. And it's up to the rights holders if they want to squeeze you. There was a Christmas DLC pack we did for Saints Row 4, and we just played on every Christmas movie joke, you know, A Christmas Story, where he shoots his eye out with a BB gun. We played on all those jokes, and we wanted a montage where the Saints, you know, it's Saints Row, it's gangster shit, and they're having a snowball fight. And we wanted, the creative director at the time wanted Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You. Yeah. So we make that request, they go to the rights holders, and they come back and said, yeah, they want $1 million to use. $1 million. $1 million. And then that's when we go, no thanks, we're gonna get Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree for like $5K, you know.
Yeah.
And we go with it instead, and it still works. A Christmas montage, feel good moment with a recognizable Christmas tune, uplifting. You get away with it for $5K.
But let me ask you this. What about original music? Like, do you create music there on the spot? Do you compose on the spot?
Yeah, and sometimes that is to establish a vibe or to test out a system. We use a middleware called Wise, WWISE. It's made by a company called Audio Kinetic. There's a competitor called Fmod. Most studios use one of those two. And that is your plug between code and asset. So
Okay.
all of those files, shotgun sounds, footsteps, voice files, music files, all go into a middleware, Wise in this case, and then it's all fed to the code. So within Wise, we have what's called an interactive music system, where we can trigger segments of music and make it change based on the gameplay. So we're using hooks from the code to feed the middleware to tell it what music segment
I get it.
to play.
Okay.
And so sometimes it's just proving out a system. And so I'll whip up something that works and we test out the system, and later on we'll use an outside composer. Or sometimes it sticks. Sometimes, it's a specific mission and I dial it in and am able to provide something. In Agents of Mayhem, I think that game shipped with 22 pieces of music from me, as well as a couple of outside composers. But we had some villains in that game that were pop stars. We had one that was loosely based on Bieber. That was just some obnoxious brat who got rich early on a hit and used his power for bad. I ended up writing 5 Bieber-esque pop songs for that actor, and we had a blast with it. And also there was a K-pop group of holograms in that one. So I wrote my first K-pop song and had Charlotte Chung, who plays Diva in Overwatch. We got to do that session together. She sang all the parts on the K-pop song. K-pop used to be very vibrant. Nowadays, K-pop just emulates Western pop. Everybody just wants to sound like Beyonce in K-pop. But if you go back closer to its origin, it was all like, bubblegum glitter and unicorn farts, and now this very, stylized music. So that's where we went with that song. So it just depends. A lot of times it's just to prove something out and get the vibe. There are a couple composers. I work with a cat named Malcolm Kirby Jr. He's over in Tokyo now. Malcolm is a for real player. He used to play with Fred Wesley back in the day. It was James Brown's trombone player, and he's a real player. But he's scored Saints Row 3, 4, and Agents of Mayhem, and so I will give him some gameplay, tell him here's the vibe, and then we use that interactive music system to break it up into segments. So he can play, something that leads into a fight, and then we have different levels of the fight, so different levels of intensity.
Yeah, so it escalates.
And every time it transitions from one piece to the next, it can do so with a big crash or swell, or where we place the breakdowns. And so you kind of have to deconstruct. You have to think about the experience, and then you have to deconstruct it and kind of segment it. Especially looking at it from a gameplay as something like a boss fight would advance through 3 or 4 levels.
Yeah.
And then there's the bigger cinematic moments and themes. And so we've worked with a couple other composers, Chris Velasco, who's done a ton of video games, and Austin Wintory, who did Journey, and a couple others. We got to work on a musical number together that was fantastic. But most of it goes to my man Malcolm Kirby Jr. over in Tokyo. He's the one.
Okay, Larry. So you brought up 2 more things. So I'm gonna quit deviating from the approved questions, and this is my last 2, maybe, depending on how you respond.
Right.
So when you look at something like Saints Row, and so you have these radio stations, and like, how is that handled? What is your involvement in that? Because one of my favorite things about those types of games is just still in the car and then listening to like all the different radio stations and seeing how much I can get before they actually start to repeat. How do you guys handle that stuff?
It's me and the audio lead again. We brainstorm. We'll work on that sort of thing for 3 years, from the time the game is concepted, all through its iterations. Because one of the last things that we do on a project is tidy up all the music licensing. because you might want the freshest, newest, and sometimes it's a retro station or sometimes it's an underground station.
Mm-hmm.
Matters less. But as far as pop goes, when you really want to try to tie it in with something popular, you got to try to make those stars align. And it's a long road of game development. You know, it's 3 years to churn out a game. And so
because you would need to know 4 years from now what's going to be popular.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and you do your best to drill in on what you want to hit. And then in that 11th hour, we finalize our list. But again, that's done with brainstorming and playlists, and people will make suggestions, but it's usually me and another cat will sit down and try to lay out, all right, well, here are all the possible radio stations. And then realistically, how many songs can we get on how many stations, and where can you stretch it? Past Saints Row games, there were, classical stations, and you can get that stuff pretty inexpensively through some resources that we have. We just kind of pay a blanket fee, and you can choose so many songs. So you can put together, it seems like you have more radio stations, and it's not unusual to come across the classical station. So it works, and we can get that for, I'm talking not a lot of money. Maybe we can do an entire radio station for a couple of grand that way. Put away. But then you have a pop station or a hip hop station. You're going to be paying out the nose if you want classics. It amazes me to see Grand Theft Audio's track lists when their games come out in their stations. I mean, I just see the money and add it up and go, holy cow!
That was my second question. Great. So when you see something like GTA 5 and you see their radios in the track list, are you then motivated to try to one up that, or do you just be like, oh man, the most we can do is try to match it? Like, how do you approach that? Right.
We won't even match it. I mean, their budgets are enormous compared to ours, and our budgets aren't
aren't skimpy at all.
No. I mean, AAA video games not cheap, and you can blow a lot of money real quick on that. And so, I just look at it and go, man, wouldn't it be nice to play with that amount of money? If money was no option, what would be the playlist I would come up with? And I can do that. I can get that to you by sundown. But what we try to do is be creative within what we have. I love the challenge, and I love, for me, just being a music kid to begin with. It's a dream come true just to discover new artists and try to curate something, and that it'll go through all of its approval processes all down the road. But it comes down to budget, and it comes down to flavor, and I get to have a heavy hand in that, and I love that piece of the work.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
So then the DJs, the voices of the DJs for all the different stations, and the ads and the commercials, you have a hand in all of that?
Oh yeah. The commercials, some writer will be assigned to, we need commercials for all these businesses, and some of them can be jokes, but some of them can be in our open world games. It's for the chop shop that you go to. Mm-hmm. And so they'll write the commercials, and then it goes through a whole approval process, and then we got to cast a voice actor, we got to sound design it, figure out music if there's music in it. And then that goes into a complicated system that says for each station we're going to play so many songs, and then we're going to play the guest DJ, and then we're going to play a commercial. All of that is driven by code too, and when we try to make that feel as realistic as it possibly can.
Man, that is so intricate. Okay, that's the end of part 2. I hope you learned a lot. Time for the quiz. Okay, that's it. Time's up. Quiz over, pencils down. How did y'all do? Hopefully this quiz was not bad. I think it should have been pretty easy. So now you have a better understanding of how these playlists for these video games are made, how these radio stations are created, and all the work that goes into making sure we have some awesome music to listen to while we riding around in our cars in these open world video games. We appreciate the love and support. If you enjoyed the video, leave us a like. If you like this type of content, subscribe. If you know someone who would benefit from learning the things that you're learning on this channel, go ahead and share the channel with them, share some videos with them, let them know what's going on so that they can come check us out as well. Again, we appreciate the support so far, and we'll see y'all next time. Peace.